This is not another ecom podcast. I'm Ian Kaneshiro. For many businesses and owners and entrepreneurs, the idea of taking their businesses international might sound overwhelming. I mean, starting a new business in your own country is already quite challenging. So how can these leaders possibly make their businesses go global? Well, here's a surprise. International expansion is more achievable than you might think. Sure, there's some obstacles to deal with, like different banking systems, language and cultural differences, and financial aspects like limited funds and import taxes. But there are clever strategies that companies can use to overcome these challenges and get their businesses running on a global scale. And in the case of Amazon, Amazon does so much of this for you. And potential rewards for the businesses that think and act globally is pretty incredible. And it's important to explore what you need to know when it comes to getting your businesses started internationally and making it grow. On today's episode, we have Tom Meek, Taxually's partnership director. Taxually is a VAT compliance solution that caters to all types of businesses. And Tom is a seasoned professional with over 5 years of experience advising organizations and entrepreneurs on global expansion strategies. Tom's expertise has been pivotal in helping businesses excel in international trade on major e-commerce platforms all over the internet. Tom, thanks so much for joining today.
No problem. Thanks very much for having me in. And appreciate the nice intro.
Thanks. So before we jump into it, is there anything else you'd like to share about yourself, about your background, about Taxually?
I think, obviously did a great introduction already, but I've been in the space now for about 7 or 8 years. I started back in tax, which I now found myself back into now. So every company that I've worked for has really been focused on Amazon or e-commerce, generally speaking, with a specific focus on international expansion, whether that's from geographical locations point of view, whether it's from a tax perspective, from a payments point of view, is all very related. I've been expanding and helping businesses, probably thousands of businesses now for 7 or 8 years. And I guess a bit of an introduction on the Taxually side. So Taxually is a SaaS-based tax company. We help over 10,000 sellers currently with their tax compliance. And we really specialize in the Amazon or e-commerce space. And we have partnerships and integrations, etc., with the likes of Amazon, Shopify, eBay, and many others. So we're really trying to simplify the way that tax compliance is viewed by sellers, as often is seen as one of the biggest hurdles. And I'm an Amazon seller myself. I've been there and done it as a UK-based business, expanding into the EU and other markets. So a lot to consider. And that's where Taxually comes in to really help with the VAT and strategic planning when it comes to how you should view the opportunity of expanding to a new market.
Excellent. I think that there is, so much going on with, global expansion, especially in the EU with like Brexit and then all the different ways that the different countries interact with each other that I'm sure we can, pull on some of that experience. I guess my first question to kind of kick us off is, when is the right time to try to enter a new market?
Yeah, question that I get asked all the time. Obviously, it really depends on where your business is established. Is it fair to say that the majority of your customer base based in the EU or US? What would you say?
The sellers that I interact with are based all over the globe, operating in both North America and the EU mostly.
Okay. So what I would say is that, we talked a little bit before we went live today. It's like Amazon has never been easier to actually get your products in front of as many consumers as possible through various models, whether it's FBA or whether you go down the fulfilled by merchant route and use a network of 3PLs. It's very easy now to get your products and your brand in front of as many potential buyers as possible. So I'd say when is the right time to expand? It really depends on a number of things, from the amount of time that you have to invest in expanding your business, the resources that you have, i.e. cash flow and things like that is also extremely important. But also your knowledge and understanding for when the right time to expand is extremely important, because businesses that don't jump in with 2 feet from the start, I've seen make a lot of mistakes. And running your brand in the home market, domestically is great. But when you actually take that step into a new market, there's a lot of things that you need to consider. So I think ensuring the right time and understanding what it takes to get in there is one of the biggest things. Now, you've also got to factor in things like timeframes. It takes a while for you to be prepared properly, especially depending on where you're based. And as a US seller, okay, or Canadian or wherever it might be, looking to expand into, let's say, the UK and EU, there might be a whole new tax system that you need to understand that differs completely from your home market. Whereas if you're based in the EU, and let's say you're based in, let's say, Germany, expanding your business internationally into France and Spain and Italy is much easier because you're dealing with very similar structures when it comes to things like tax and Amazon programs, FBA programs. So it really depends on a number of things. But back to your question, where's the right time to expand? I'd say once you've got to a really comfortable place with understanding how the general structure and processes work of your business, that you've dominated or got a really good start to selling in your home marketplace. And at that point, when you've mastered all of those things, you're ready to take that next step, which typically speaking, depending on where you're based, let's say US brand expanding to the UK and EU, is $500,000 in revenue and upwards. Now, if you've got prior experience in selling and you really feel comfortable before that bracket, a lot of businesses do it earlier. But I'd say the majority of businesses that take that step are doing around 50, 60, 70K a month in sales before they take the step into the UK and EU.
Yeah, that's really interesting. If you would have asked me before this chat, I probably would have guessed a number a bit lower. But I think what's really interesting is that number is also kind of indicative of the processes that you probably already have in place in your company to be able to pivot those to reach the international market. So you already have, some kind of supply or logistics chain in place that you need to make adjustments to or extensions to get that product into another country. And my guess is that's easier to go from, one point in the US and add kind of like an add-on to get everything to the EU, for a better lack of my knowledge, my words. But I think that number was significantly higher than I thought, but you're talking about ease of implementation.
Absolutely. And as I say, a lot of brands will tend to do it earlier. Obviously, the US is the biggest market, so a lot of brands will start there. Even if they're not based in the US, they may start in the US. But a lot of brands that become very comfortable, again, depends on resources, time, cash flow, etc., as to how quickly you can do these things. That's just the general understanding from years of speaking to entrepreneurs that are taking that step into a new market. But some of the advantages of doing that, I think, are really important to highlight. So, really understanding why businesses are doing that. It's not always a case of just driving revenue. I think a lot of it is diversification and managing your risk as well. We know that Amazon, or like any e-commerce channel or marketplace for that matter, is it can be risky. It can be turbulent. You can have competitors that are really knocking you down on pricing. You can have margins decreasing. We've seen a real wave of increased demand throughout COVID-19, but we've also seen a lot of other factors that have affected margins with shipping pricing and, containers, 5-6xing and even higher in some cases. So I think to diversify your markets is really important, and to build your brand in different regions, different jurisdictions, so that you can rely on different revenue streams when times get tough in other areas. I think other reasons why a lot of brands will tend to get into a new market is because they want to benefit from different seasonal opportunities. A lot of brands that go from the UK to Australia, for example, that are maybe very specific to certain niches that are weather specific or season specific, that summer's reversed and things like that. So, you can make opportunities out of expanding your business, especially when you have surplus stock as well. And I think, to increase your brand recognition and the visibility that you get when you go to a new market, 750 million people in the EU, that you could potentially gain traction from. Now, if you compare that to the US, 330 or so, you're actually looking at the EU as a bigger opportunity than the US in a lot of cases. Yes, it's made up of lots of different countries and different markets, but FBA as a model has allowed you to actually locally fulfill your stock, send the stock in from China, wherever you're shipping to, into, let's say, Germany, and Amazon take care of the rest and actually locally fulfill your stock. So it's never been easier to get there. And there's so many different reasons as to why a business would want to do it.
Yeah, that's it's a lot to unpack there, but the opportunity is obviously there. And I think that, it probably comes down to the brands and these companies just identifying that they're ready, number one, and then taking kind of that leap of faith and going all in, as you said, jumping with both feet. And to kind of go off that idea, you mentioned that if a company doesn't go all in with their expansion strategy, that there's mistakes to be made. What are some of the mistakes that you see happening when companies don't go all in?
Yeah, good question. So obviously there's a lot that can be relevant to tax, but I'd say let's take a step back. So I would say that the majority of businesses either don't do enough market research before they enter a new market. They predict that their products may be well received, but they don't do enough of a drill down into their competitors, into the landscape, even into things like the localization, the language that's required. What are the buying habits in the country that they're looking to go to? And that's quite specific to the likes of Germany versus Spain and Italy and the UK. Everyone has a very different way of living, a very different perception on how products should be bought for different categories. And I'd also say that Amazon is also not the biggest market in a lot of countries in the EU. For example, in Poland, Allegro, a lot of people have heard of, is actually bigger than Amazon. So I think when we talk about jumping in with 2 feet, making the right strategic decisions right from the start, based on the data that you have understood and really built out a very specific strategy as to why you're going into that market is really important. And I touched on localization a second ago. What I mean by that is that when you're dealing with different languages, the keywords need to be translated, not via Google. They need to be translated in the local language by someone who is based in that country, so you understand that you don't mess up on any potential language barriers. And things like regulatory and compliance hurdles, ensuring that your products don't have certain requirements with different markings. If they're electronic, they might need CE markings if you fall under different categories. And all of these sorts of things Taxually are able to guide businesses on when we first talk to them and really understand what those steps are for you to get into that market. I think shipping and logistics is another one. A lot of businesses will be like, okay, great. UK and Germany are the largest markets. Okay. They might be the largest markets overall. Are they the larger markets for your product? And it comes back down to doing your research. Where's the best place for you to ship your products to is another one. A lot of businesses, when they enter the EU, will go direct into Germany because it's the largest market. But some of the more savvy sellers I've seen have made use of going through the Netherlands. You're probably thinking, well, in an Amazon perspective, Netherlands isn't actually, a market that people would view as a strong opportunity. But they're going through the Netherlands for a tax reason, which is so they can defer their import tax, which we can come on to all of this in a minute. But when you defer your import tax, you have better cash flow. You don't have to pay a percentage on the border. You can then move your products into Germany, into FBA. You're able to then sell either cross-border or locally fulfilled, depending on your model. So there's a lot of different things that businesses should consider. That's just a few.
Yeah, that's super interesting about going into the Netherlands, and I'm going to kind of pick at that a little bit. Can you unpack that idea of deferring the import tax?
Yeah, for sure. So what businesses need to be aware of is that, like most businesses, right, that are going to be listening to this are going to be like Amazon-based sellers, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So 90% of people that are looking to approach a new market like the UK or EU are going to be using FBA. It's easy. Why not? Now, as you establish yourself and you can really dig into the numbers, you may see that FBM or fulfilling via 3PL might be more cost effective. I don't know. But I think the thing to really think about from a tax point of view when you ship into a new market is that you need to be VAT registered as soon as your products go into a new country. When you have a physical presence, i.e. your stock is in a country, in the UK or EU, you have to have a VAT number in place, tax number in place to be able to store. Amazon will not let you have the storage space or even allow you to send a shipment to their warehouse unless you have a live VAT number registered to your own company. So that's a really important thing to do. Now, the first thing you need to know about that is that it can take between 10 and 12 weeks for you to even acquire that tax number. And that's from the point that the documents are together, you've spoken to Taxually, you've uploaded it all onto the system, i.e. the tax office in that given country, has accepted your documents. And from that point, we see an average of 3.5 month time frame before you get your tax number. Okay. So the first thing you need to bear in mind is the time frame before you can get into that country.
That's for each country. And that's an average. So it doesn't matter if we're talking about Germany, France, the Netherlands. They all have the similar time frame.
Up and down. The UK used to take 4 weeks. It now takes 12. Germany, 10 to 12. France, Spain, they all sit around that time frame, I think. And often it takes 2 or 3 weeks for businesses to collect documents, to sign contracts, be aware of the fees, their entrance to the market, cash flow, stock, localization, listings, all of those things takes a while to get ready. So if you're a business that's listening to this podcast right now and you're thinking that in Q1 you want to be making the most of Australia, the UAE, the UK, the EU markets, book a free consultation with a Taxually sales rep. We can talk you through your requirements, and that's what we'd recommend to do because it takes a long time to do. But back to the question on what do businesses need to think about when they're actually reporting from a tax perspective? You need to be VAT registered. We've established that. There are also 2 taxes that you have to pay on import. So your products are coming from China into the UK or into the EU. You have to pay import duty and import VAT. Okay? Duty and import VAT. Import duty is based on the commodity code of your product. Okay? So whatever you sell, whatever's included in your shipment, you'll need to pay a percentage of duty, which is non-refundable, and that goes at customs. Okay? You pay that at customs. You also pay import VAT. Okay? Import VAT will be calculated based on the percentage of tax that's due in that country. So in the UK it's 20%, in Germany it's 19%. Okay? But it differs from country to country. So you pay a percentage of the cost value of your shipment. Okay? And you pay a percentage, let's say it's the UK, you pay 20% of the cost value of your shipment at customs. Okay? However, back to the Netherlands example, what the Netherlands allows you to do at their VAT rate is they're able to defer, i.e. pay later, the VAT amount that was due. Okay? Now, the thing that you need to know about import VAT, and I appreciate a lot of this confusing, happy to answer any questions separately if anyone wants to book a call, but import VAT is reclaimable, okay, only if you're VAT registered, okay? Now, you'll pay that percentage and be able to reclaim it, whereas when you go through the Netherlands, you don't actually have to pay that import VAT. You defer it to when you pay your sales VAT. Does that make sense? Because it's quite a difficult one to break down.
So what I'm understanding is that because that import VAT is refundable, in the Netherlands, instead of them taking the money and giving it back to you anyways, they just say, pay us when it's, or just don't pay us.
Yeah. So basically what you're doing is you're deferring the payment. So you also have to pay the sales VAT, which is like sales tax in the US. So you have the 2 taxes on import duty and import VAT, and then you have the sales VAT, like your sales tax. Okay. So you're still going to be paying a sales tax to the German government, to the German tax authorities or the UK tax authorities or wherever it might be. But that import VAT is then reclaimable once you pay that VAT. Okay, that VAT liability on the sale.
Well, because the idea is that the end user, the end customer, is the one that's paying that tax, and so am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, ultimately, yeah. But what the deferment account will allow you to do in the Netherlands is it will help you with your cash flow. You don't have to fork out that 21% in the Netherlands because because you're deferring the input back to the back end.
Interesting. Let me take us in a slightly different direction because it's something that's really interesting to me. So what I understand from one of your comments earlier is that once you have your product and item inside a country, you need a VAT code and you need to pay VAT on that item.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the case of, let's say I have a warehouse in France and a customer from Germany purchases that item, and I have my account with, I don't know, with DHL or FedEx or whomever, it doesn't matter. I ship that item to the customer. My curiosity is asking which country is getting the benefit, that tax benefit? Like who takes that money?
Yeah, really good question. So a lot of changes in the past, and I don't want to make this too complicated because there's a lot to unpack here when it comes to that and cross-border sales versus local sales. So I'm going to take a step back from that and talk about FBA programs and why you'd want to sell cross-border over locally fulfilling, because I think that's a really important piece. I think when businesses want to say, in your example, I'm going to ship to Germany. Germany's the biggest market. Great. I'm in Germany. Fantastic. Amazon also give you the ability to sell cross-border into the likes of France and Italy and Spain and all the other markets that Amazon have a presence or storefront in. Okay. It's brilliant. Now, the disadvantage of you as a seller fulfilling from Germany cross-border into another country is a number of things. One, the speed of delivery is not great because you're going further into another country. So you have a cross-border transaction fee. Okay, so the amount that you pay on your FBA cost is higher. That's the first thing to think about. Because it takes a longer time, you're most likely not going to be in line with the Prime requirements, which me as a constant Amazon shopper, I'm sure most people are very familiar with Amazon Prime. Most people that pay for Prime want the Prime badge and the Prime facility when buying a product. You want it to be next day or within 48 hours. There's benefits of Prime, it's locally sourced, etc. So what I'm trying to say is that if you don't have the Prime badge, you miss out on potential sales. The customer doesn't get the product as quickly, okay, which is not good. Plus, it's more expensive because you've had to go cross-border, okay? So there's a lot of disadvantages. Now, the advantage from selling from Germany to France is that you don't have to be VAT registered in France, okay? You can send cross-border. But the way that Amazon and the algorithm works is, and the way I've seen thousands of sellers trying to make additional countries work from the country they're selling for, i.e. Germany into France, Germany into Spain, Germany into Italy, it very rarely works anywhere near as well as when you locally fulfill, for those three reasons that I just brought up. So what I would say to anyone listening that may have stock in one country selling into another and say, oh, well, Tom, my sales aren't that great in Spain. I'll be like, okay, are you locally fulfilling or are you selling cross-border? I'm selling cross-border. Okay. Well, the Amazon algorithm will not favor you unless you're locally fulfilling because you don't have the Prime badge. Okay. The speed of delivery is too slow. And that makes unhappy customers. The amount of customers that search via Prime only is huge. So again, you're automatically cutting off that market. So if I could give any advice to someone is, yes, there's a small cost saving to register in that additional country. But if you're really serious about making that new country or jurisdiction work, it's a worthy investment because otherwise you'll never find out what the potential return of that market is. Does that make sense, Ian?
Absolutely. Absolutely. But just to kind of go back to that original question, when I do sell cross-border, well, first of all, let's go back to everything that you said, just to kind of sum it all up, is that if an item is in country, it has a higher chance of making those sales because I have the Prime badge. Also, if I'm a reseller, that means I have a better chance at the buy box, and it gets faster. And and when it comes down to like the VAT versus the extra FBA fee, that stuff kind of evens out, and you actually get you even get a bit more benefit from selling locally, whether from FBA or like a 3PL or your own warehouse in that country. I just wanted to kind of go back to again a question that I had about who pays the VAT and when, which countries are taking a percentage out of that VAT. Because if I'm storing in one country but I'm selling in another, when I sell it in the other, that end consumer is essentially paying VAT on that item. And so does country A never get a cut of a VAT percentage in that manner?
Yeah, really good question. So what happens is when you're selling cross-border, you'll need to register for something called OSS, okay, which is called the one-stop shop. It's simplified the way that taxes are shared amongst countries across the EU. So what you do is you register for the country you're storing in, which in this case is Germany. You would then need to have an OSS registration. And what OSS allows businesses to do is you have a local tax to pay, so i.e. to Germany for your locally fulfilled sales, Germany to Germany. And then you have an OSS return, which is all these things that taxually look after, which is for your cross-border sales, okay? Now, you pay that to the German government, and then the German government would then be responsible, or the tax office in Germany would be responsible for paying the countries that you are servicing cross-border, okay? So the payment goes to one country, and then they, through OSS, have to then like reallocate those funds in accordance to end customer, which in this case is France.
Interesting. And so this is something that all EU countries are compliant on. And so, through everything that all the conversations that they have in Brussels, and they come up with these solutions, these programs, this OSS, as you're saying, in order to make sure that every country gets probably as fair is a tough term to use, because I'm sure some countries are feeling like they're not getting their fair share. But the idea is to give everyone their fair share, whether I'm storing the item and using, all the infrastructure of that country to, put a truck on the road, like that costs money to the country. Like they deserve that cut, even if the end sale is not there.
Exactly that. Yeah.
And so in terms of that, like different programs like that, do we see that the EU is coming up with more of these programs that sellers should be aware of in order to make sure that they are continuously compliant? And how often as a business should I be checking to make sure that I'm compliant, and do I get notified? These are all questions that, one might have.
Yeah, for sure. So Amazon are always trying to streamline processes for sellers. We've seen them do that with VAT. Taxually also power Amazon VAT services, which is their in-house like VAT offering, which is powered by other sort of tax experts and providers. I think there are always different programs and things that sellers should stay on top of course. I think there's new programs that have been released more recently, but they always have a slightly different effect on the seller privileges and, who owns the products on sale. We talk about vendor versus like private selling or like seller central selling. So there are a number of advantages and disadvantages to go around that. But I think to answer your question, I think it's really important to work with a tax provider that you have, constant support from, and be able to pick up the phone and ask what the most tax, efficient way of operating is super important. And your tax provider should be the one to keep you up to date with these sorts of things.
Yeah, I guess that makes a lot of sense. Taxes and the regulations that surround them are so complicated that, I'm sure that even these tax providers, these consultants, probably have a hard time wrapping their head around it. And so even as an Amazon seller, when my expertise might be, product development or sourcing, because it's not tax, you should just go to an outside party, let them handle it for you, because they're the ones that are doing it all day, every day. and really allow you to focus on what you need to do.
Exactly. I think, go to a lot of conferences, we hear some of the top sellers in the globe speak. We do a lot of talking ourselves about international expansion and things as you consider some of the things that we've talked about today. I think one of the biggest things that comes up towards the end of a panel or end of a keynote, whatever it might be, is sort of what you would consider as like one of the most important things to do as an Amazon seller. And one of the biggest things that always get mentioned is outsource the things that you're not good at. And it goes the same in e-commerce, the same in business generally. Taxes, unless you have an absolute passion for it, it's one of those things that a lot of people, or the majority of people, look to outsource. One, because it's not fun and it's an administrative thing that you need to do. It's a requirement, a legal requirement for you to stay compliant. You need to stay in line with Amazon's terms of service. Don't want penalties. You don't want your account suspended. It's a must-have, and it's really important to get right from the start. Otherwise, it can have a huge knock-on effect and impact your business later down the line. Outsource these sorts of things isn't that expensive. You have a registration cost, you have a compliance cost. Okay, so registration is getting you your tax code, getting you your VAT number. And then after you've got that, you then have a reporting requirement on a monthly or quarterly or annual basis, depending on how big the company is, to file the taxes that are due. We're talking like $700, $800 or €750 a year per country. It's not a massive investment, okay? So to outsource it to a professional that you have complete peace of mind on, you have a dashboard like your online banking that you can go in and you can see what your VAT liability is, how it works, what it does, and when to pay is super, super easy and super efficient to do. And of course, there's things like fiscal representation, which is a whole other thing we haven't talked about, which you're going to need in some countries. They won't actually let you register on your own as an individual or as a company based overseas because you need to have a fiscal rep. So there's a whole host of reasons why businesses should work with a tax provider. So I've covered off a few.
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, I think that's a kind of a common thread, through conferences and even on this show that we talk about, outsourcing the things that you don't want to do, you can't do, and allow you to focus on the things that you're good at, the value that you yourself will bring to your own organization. Tom, as we kind of end this episode, I wanted to ask you if there's any final thoughts around expanding into other countries, VAT compliance, or anything else that sellers listening to this podcast should think about when taking that first step into global expansion.
We covered the majority of them. I think to maybe highlight the point I just made is like there are so many service providers out there that are willing to give a lot of time and advice to businesses that are looking to scale. And Taxually is an example. We have a whole host of consultants and tax experts, strategists that deal day in, day out with Amazon sellers that are looking to expand. Whatever the country, happy to jump on a call. And I know that that's so relevant to other parts of the space, from shipping to, the whole logistics and supply chain piece, into the likes of account management, PPC, listing optimization. But when it comes to expansion, you need to define your checklist. You need to do your market research. You need to be confident that it's the right decision for your business, and that you're at a stage where you can invest your time, resource, and inventory and cash flow into making it a success. I personally think that there's two ways of looking at UK and EU expansion: phase 1 and phase 2, depending on how confident you are and how experienced you are from a expansion point of view. Most businesses will look at UK and Germany as phase 1, or UK, Germany, and France as phase 1. And then they'll look at rolling out into phase 2, which encompasses the whole pan-EU program, which is Germany, France, Italy, Spain, Poland, and Czech Republic, as well as a few additional countries coming soon. So yeah, I'd say reach out to the right people. There's a lot of free advice going. There's a lot of experts that have been there and done it. And I'd also say events are a really great way of speaking to like-minded sellers that you can go and speak to, relate to, ask questions about. And there's a huge amount of learning that can be done at events as well.
Most definitely. Well, Tom, thanks for a lot of information about a lot of different things today. You know, we spoke about expanding into the markets, you know, how that might differ between when you import an item, and even how that differs when they cross borders through the OSS,
Yeah.
through the OSS program. And so, thank you for coming on and sharing your expertise. And you know, if anybody wants to find Tom, he can be found with Taxually, and all of his information will be attached to this podcast. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks very much for having me in. Good to chat. And yeah, anyone that wants to reach out, please do.
Cool. Thanks, Tom.